DPadgett from Tennessee State University, who's talking about the environmental justice movement that is concerned with some of the environmental injustices that are found throughout the nation as well as throughout the world. In a real sense, Dr. Padgett. Let's continue our conversation, Dr. Padgett.
Yes, well, as I mentioned before, the environmental justice movement started when the environmental activists and civil rights activists came together during the 1970s, and it was pretty much a grassroots movement, but it started to gain some traction, and we started to get some amount of institutionalization beginning in the 1980s. And what I have here is a General Accounting Office report, which was the first environmental justice report, and it found that 3 out of 4 landfills in the South are found in low-income and African-American communities. Soon after, in 1987, came the Toxic Waste and Race in the United States study that was commissioned by, at the time, Reverend Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis, and that study found that it was race, not income, that was the most likely predictor for whether a person was going to live near a toxic waste site. During this time, Dr. Robert Bull, as I mentioned before, who is known as the father of environmental justice, was working on a landfill siting in Houston, Texas. Actually, he was working for a group that was fighting against a landfill that was planned for an African-American community. As a result of his research, he wrote this book, Dumping in Dixie, which is probably one of the most well-known must-read books in terms of learning more about environmental justice. That book was published in 1990, so you start to see the academic community come together with the government a little bit, religious institutions, faith-based organizations coming together, and they came together in 1991 in Washington, D.C. They literally had a march on Washington in support of environmental justice, and they had a preamble and the whole thing. So that was a really bellwether event in 1991 when they marched on Washington. And since then, the movement has become much more sophisticated. Here locally, if we want to look at local issues, during the 1990s, when I moved to Nashville, there was a very well-known environmental injustice case here surrounding the Bordeaux landfill. The Bordeaux landfill was sited in Bordeaux. Bordeaux was one of the first places that African Americans of some means could move outside of the cities, following the 1968 Housing Rights Act to some degree. And then right along behind them came the Metro landfill, which used to take half of the city's waste. And now, Bordeaux was a classic case because a lot of people will argue, well, people are next to these landfills and things because they're poor. But Bordeaux was not a low-income African-American community. In fact, they had some of the most educated, maybe not wealthy, but certainly upper middle class African Americans